I got it. Thank you. Okay, so this is a photograph of my grandmother and two cousins taken in Florida. And I've used this image to describe my attraction to the ocean. And when I was in Australia, people were asking me, why the ocean? Why surfers? And this is what I went back to my grandmother and these days on the beach as a young child. And coupled with the ocean was the glamour and social connections that my grandmother and my mother and her friends so easily made. This is my mother and me at the beach when I was in my 20s, and my grandmother and one of my mother's close friends. And this is where I grew up, Yonkers, New York. And while an undergrad at SVA, I made this photograph of the family home with a large format camera, my first introduction to large format photography. And as you could see, I did pretty badly. I couldn't level the camera, I couldn't straighten the camera, but I did get a good picture of my brother. And while at school, I tried to find my voice, that is, if I had one. My pictures were of the people and places that I knew. This is my friend Aline, who I think is here tonight. Hi, Aline. And I photographed strangers and family, mother, my brother, myself. And later, my cousin Lana, who lived in the Bronx. I was influenced by the time in which I became a photographer. Robert Frank and the social documentary style was the one I gravitated towards. My aunt, cousin, and I were all close, so it wasn't hard to spend time with them and to take pictures. I photographed Lana and her friends in the family home and around her Bronx neighborhood. Over a period of several months, I'm sorry, that's my heat banging in the distance. Over a period of several months, I got to know Lana and her friends a lot better. We hung out and she had dance parties. This is the time of disco. And smoking was a really big part of being a teenager. Thought I'd give you a little more feeling to it. So this was the 1970s. And so I was running around with my Leica, developing my own film, making my prints, and trying to engage in what I thought was the voice of photography at the time. But as I got closer to my cousin and I started hanging out with her more, things got a little more complicated. And they took a different direction. So without saying too much, I was asked to destroy a certain negative and to stop coming, which I did and I didn't do. But I show you all this to reveal that while I thought I had a direction, I didn't really. I was looking, I was thinking, what can I express that's authentic and meaningful? How do I find my subject matter? I was attracted to the social landscape. That's where I first found my voice, or maybe better said, that's where I found my first voice. Reflecting back on other people, I could tell a story of a city, of a place, and the people in that place. I could go to one very specific location in this huge metropolis and find a stage full of characters, mostly unaware and uncaring if they were noticed. I say this now, but I didn't know this then, that my vision was a projection. And although I photographed strangers, I was really exploring my own understanding of what it meant to be a young woman alone, independent, and in a family through the lens of a Leica in the New York City subway in the 1970s. Fast forward to 1983 and the series titled Something Between the Two of Them, when I began working with a vintage Rolly and later a Hasselblad and in color. After the premature birth of my first child, I turned the lens the other way around to explore ideas of motherhood, womanhood, feminism, and maternity, and alcohol, and marriage. I was interested in exploring gender roles with a dash of humor. I created a narrative drama, part fact, part fiction, incorporating aspects of my own experience. Fast forward again to 1992. So postgraduate school, where I learned a few alternative and historic printing techniques and combined it with my fascination for the silhouette and 19th century photography. Inspired by Meyer Bridges' study of the human figure in motion, I began isolating single frames from his study of women, which for scientific purposes, of course, was all done in nude. These women were holding objects associated with domesticity and femininity, while the male nudes in the series all held objects associated with masculinity and manliness. So using the silhouette as a device, I masked the nudity of the women, creating a feminist context for these women to float in. The female nude in the context of photographic history has mostly been a male view, and my decision to silhouette each one woman was a way to obstruct this age-old gaze. I titled this the Untitled Silhouette Series. The images are all printed by contact and platinum palladium on what may be hard to see on the previous picture, but they're all in two parts. I photographed the top part of the woman first, and then the lower part, her legs, second, and then I joined them together to create a whole. By the time I got around to photographing the men, I was able to do it all on one image, one negative. The men were made later on. The series is kind of small, but it's kind of interesting. So fast forward again to the end of the 1990s, when after a year of living abroad, I had a kind of breakup with photography and felt that photography was not the only way I could express myself. I had started the School of Visual Arts in the Fine Arts department and decided to rekindle my drawing skills. I made these drawings from photographs I had of my children. And this is a picture of myself and my son, and myself when I was close to my son's age. So I tried to play with time and create the idea that my son and I could have been friends in another time zone, time frame. My parents. And then after about a year of watercolor drawing, I found my way back to photography. I took out a large format camera and I went to Montauk to photograph the ocean. I titled the series Ocean Details, and I made black and white negatives, which I then made platinum palladium prints from. The work began as a meditative study, an exploration of surface, form, abstraction, and emotion. So perched at the edge of the bluff was just me, my large format camera, making these portraits of the ocean surface. I was inspired by people like Richard Misrak, and with his sublime photographs of political sites, and also Hiroshi Sugimoto and V. S. Salmons. So I began by concentrating on the feelings I got from those images. I believed the ocean to be an emotional landscape, and I wanted to explore that idea, how you could make an emotional photograph, if you could. So this was my first attempt into landscape photography, and so I continued to explore print processes to see which one suited this project best. So as I said, I started with platinum palladium, but then I also blew this up to wallpaper size. It's from an exhibition at the Peabody Essex Museum. There was a bit of a procedure to creating these pictures with the equipment I had. It required a high vantage point so I could frame the ocean without the horizon. I needed the water to be as close to the edge of the bluffs as possible so I could fill the frame. So I started listening to the weather radio and timing my trips to be there at only high tide so that the water was crashing close to the bluffs. And then I needed a long enough lens and a reducing back just to make that very narrow point of view. Most of these pictures are from 5x7 negatives. I worked for years in all seasons and all weather. And my focus was the creative and formal elements of interpreting water, but my awareness of the landscape as a political point of view, an endangered resource was growing. So drawing attention to the ocean and water in general became more important as global water concerns became more urgent. I photographed at the same location for many years, and the Sea Sky series followed quite naturally. Arranging the frame with minimal amount of water, mostly sky, was a way to stay close to this particular landscape, but to shake it up also. Until eventually this happened. This is the first time that I realized the place where I had been shooting all winter long was also a surf break. But, you know, I'm a feisty New Yorker, so I put two fingers in my mouth and I whistled out into the ocean. And I started waving these surfers, trying to tell them to get out of my way. Of course, they did not. And I took this picture. Initially, I considered surfers interlopers into my pristine and empty landscape. I went there to be alone. Then I began to see that this was a place we were all interacting in and that it was a shared environment and that it was important to pay attention to that. These people inhabited the landscape. Maybe they were there for a reason. In this particular image, the surfers give a sense of scale and importance to the landscape. And you can't really tell if they're fish or human. And this is something that as I began to make tintype portraits of surfers, I began to enjoy this kind of morphing between human and fish. For me, surfers are primal. They're so much a part of the ocean landscape that I'm surprised I avoided them for so long. And maybe more importantly is that what I'm trying to do by photographing surfers fits so well with what they're trying to do just by being surfers. So Surfland began at Ditch Plains in Montauk, New York in 2006, and it is my longest project to date. This is the first tintype I had ever made that made me think I had a project. I wanted to consider the name Surfland or consider the title that would suggest this mythic idea of surfing and to place it in a landscape that sounds as real as any country like Finland or Iceland. What I didn't know at the time was that Surfland does exist and that the people in my pictures are the inhabitants of this land out of time. So tonight I'll be telling you about how this project started, where it's evolved to today, and also just enough about the process to see how it integrates with my imagery and why I believe it's such a good match, both conceptually and visually. I realize I'm talking to photographers, so many of you may know about the process, but bear with me if you do. So my tintypes are one-of-a-kind positives. They're sized at 8x10, 11x14, 14x17, and there's still a few 1620s in the project. And because it's an historic process better associated with Western geological surveys and American Civil War photography than surfers, I thought I'd begin by telling you what goes into my making a tintype. Collodion is a wet process and was most popular between 1850 and 1870 and was invented by Frederick Scott Archer in 1851. In Greek, collodion means glue, and it's a chemical, a clear, syrupy liquid composed of gum cotton and ether. And so combined with iodides and bromides, it's a base for a photographic emulsion. It can be poured on a variety of substrates, and for this project, I chose blackened metal to make a tintype. I don't know if you can see my pointer pointing at all these dark boxes on the beach. The main reason for this was purely practical. A positive image is just an underexposed negative with black behind it, and so it requires a shorter exposure time. So even on the beach with full sun and a fast lens, I still have very long exposure times, and getting blurry pictures is very easy. And because it's a wet plate technique, it means that the chemicals are all hand applied, exposed, and developed before the plate dries. So therefore, all of my photographs are made start to finish on location with a portable darkroom. And because all my process work is done in the field, I see my pictures instantaneously, as do all of my subjects and passerbys. And this is an interesting and key factor in the work. Having my subjects see their image immediately after it's shot factors into their participation into the project, and it's actually a motivating tool that helps me to connect with them and them with me. This is a situation where making a photograph is more than a simple exchange between a photographer and a sitter. It's an interaction, an advertisement about photography and my project in public and on the beach.
Okay, on the three. I have to say that out loud.
Oh my God.
God.
The one.
I love that. It's digital photography. My dad. Oh, I'm getting tears.
So when the plate plunges into the fixer, it is a very exciting moment for everybody around, and it's the thing that draws the people and to the project. So this process, which I often describe as the Polaroid of yesteryear, and this way of working quickly became very integral to my making these tintype portraits of surfers. One of the things I'm trying to do with the medium of collodion is to use it as a valid contemporary tool. And photographing these individual surf souls is my attempt to understand the surf character. I'm pursuing a sociological and historic document that's captured along the fringe and coastline, pictures that I hope embody the spirit of freedom and adventure so intrinsic to the human psyche, a subject matter that I don't believe is so well documented by the fine art photography world. I also relate to it as just another choice in photographic medium, the same way that large format represents a valid choice over 35mm or digital versus film. And because the collodion process is so integral to the work, I can't really ignore it when talking about the project. There's an interdependency to the images and the process and how they work together to create more than just the actual picture. It's an experience that I share with the people I photograph that really couldn't happen any other way. The fact that the speed of collodion is very slow means that my exposures are long, and just how long depends on the chemistry, the lens I'm working with, where I am on the planet, and what time of year it is. Another reason I was attracted to collodion are its characteristics, which I love. However, they're very different than traditional film. It's a hand-poured emulsion, so the handmade quality of the image is always present. It renders skin tones differently, making some people look lighter and others much darker. And because it can reveal things unseen by the naked eye, there's a sense of mystery and magic to the process. It seems to have the ability of capturing something essential. So this is a color chart and a collodion swatch chart. So you can compare how a color photograph looks and how it's rendered in collodion. And I think it's interesting to see the blues and the reds and pinks and how they are rendered. Because without knowing that, you can get a picture that doesn't amount to much. So collodion is very sensitive to blue light and insensitive to yellow. Skies often appear blown out, and yellow objects are rendered black. And this is a comparison shot, as I said, of the collodion. Sorry, this thing is just moving at its own pace. Let's see. Chance, accident, spontaneity. I can't even talk, sorry. Tide, wind, weather. These are the ingredients that go into my picture making process. And because all of my work takes place outdoors and my process is wet, it's both weather and time sensitive. There's a lot of satisfaction watching my subjects watch their image clear in the fixer in daylight, right on the beach in front of them, and it really never fails to please. And also because it's on location, I meet and connect with random, interesting, curious, strange, and most often really wonderful people. The beach is a leisure place where people come and go all day long. It's a constantly changing scene. And working in public is a type of performance that leaves me open to all kinds of things. My making pictures is also the subject of other people's pictures as well. The spectacle is circular. People are not afraid to engage with me, and while that helps attract sitters, it's quite distracting. There's questions about me and my camera, what am I doing? And sometimes these questions are very entertaining. How old is my camera? Am I testing the water? Is my dark box a hot dog stand? Am I selling tacos? And my favorite one, what time does the puppet show start? The experience of meeting and finding subjects is one of the most interesting aspects to the project. At first, I began just by going to the local surfing beach, setting up my camera and dark box, and waiting to see what happened. On my first day, Brett came over and he asked me about my large wooden camera, and I explained a bit about it and the process I was working with, and that I was doing a series of portraits of surfers. I asked him to pose and he agreed. So we stepped into the water and he asked me what he should do. You know, I'm the photographer, I'm supposed to know. So I told him to hold his board in some fashion, which he found very offensive and disagreeable. And he bluntly told me that that's not the way that surfers hold their boards. And so he proceeded to instruct me on how to photograph a surfer. So letting the subject guide the photograph was something that I learned that day on the spot. And this is how Brett was comfortable for his 3-second exposure. In the first year of the project, I spent a considerable amount of time hanging out at the local beach and trying to be assertive, approaching strangers, and trying to get people interested in participating. I had this cool little sideshow called a big wooden camera, a historic process to tempt people with, and it was still very challenging for me. I was still considering myself an introspective landscape photographer, and it was hard to approach people. But putting oneself in the public eye does garner a certain amount of attention, and quite early on, people liked the idea of what I was doing, and they were interested in having a tintype made. So this predates the iPhone and selfie phenomenon, so I had an advantage. Mike watched me at work, and he asked if I would make a tintype portrait of him, and at this point, I wasn't really interested in selling any work, so I struck a deal to scan the plate and to give him a print for free. And this became a practice of mine for a little while so I could draw people to the project and to make sure that people understood I was interested in the project and not really capitalizing on making portraits of surfers on the beach for money. By coincidence, Mike also happened to be Jimmy Buffett's manager, so he arranged for us to do a tintype portrait. Jimmy looks pretty good here. Others have taken liberties with their prints, especially during the holidays. So by this time, I imagine you figured out that I'm not a surfer. And fun fact, I discovered that the artist Raymond Pettibone is also not a surfer. I came to the series as an outsider, for good or bad. I think that this is an important distinction. I arrived here with a sense of discovery. Surfers were not a known quotient. I believe that not knowing what it meant to be a surfer enabled me to explore the subject matter with a sense of freedom and without expectation. As the series developed, I began to understand the subculture of surfers as people who, on a regular basis, seek a connection with nature and unabashedly engage in their quest for joy. To me, they're part human and animal. It's an endless cycle of coming out of or returning to the sea. So if you choose to look at the images from an anthropological point of view, the people in the portraits seem to be both primitive and contemporary. Their surfboards are like symbols or totems, revealing each individual's character. Wetsuits and clothing are another descriptive symbol revealing time, place, fashion, and because the photographs are positives, both the image and the text read backwards. This affects the way you understand the picture. So glaring logos appear more like the design or hieroglyphics, and brand names are no longer prominent. Cultural anthropology is one field of anthropology that examines culture as a meaningful scientific concept. Cultural anthropologists study cultural variation among humans, collect observations, usually through participant observation called fieldwork, and examine the impact of global economic and political processes on local cultural realities. I like that, local cultural realities. As an artist and photographer, I connect with this idea, and I recognize my actions as being somewhat akin to fieldwork. I have revisited the same location repeatedly. I arrived with my requisite gear. I've watched, I've waited, and then I've interacted. In a piece in Huck magazine, the writer Ted Endo mentions Everard M. Thurn, the colonial governor and amateur anthropologist and photographer, who in 1893 at the Royal Anthropological Institute in London presented his famous paper on the photographing of indigenous peoples. My special concern, he said, is as to the use of the camera for the accurate record of these folk regarded as living beings. M. Thurn's main concern was familiarizing the exotic, finding a way for the rigid European imagination to come to terms with a being that was on the surface wholly different from them. So here we are over 120 years later in an age of media oversaturation, and photographers are faced with an inverse problem. Everything looks the same. All kinds of images can be accessed at the click of a button, especially ones of surfers. And paradoxically, photographing people as sentient beings is as hard as ever. I didn't really have a clue when I began this project that I was seeking out the long-lost tribe of surfing right there on my local beach. Most people I photograph only once and I make only one picture of them, but there are others that I photograph over time. Here's Mike on the right in 2015 with his girlfriend. There he is with his triplet siblings in 2007. As time went on, I began to learn more about surf culture, in particular surfboards, and what went into the art of making a surfboard. Boards as an object became an attraction and motivation for me to photograph. Crafted of solid wood or a synthetic polymer and often decorated with drawings, graffiti, or scratches, they are powerful, idiosyncratic expressions that serve a dual purpose, self-definition and tool to a surfer's joy. Functionally, for me, their size and weight help maintain stillness throughout my long exposures. And while photographing in France, I met a surfboard collector who introduced me to his collection. There's an architectural element and totemic presence to surfboards. I discovered that surfboard shapers were just as important as and legendary as surfers. They're regional and there are shapers everywhere. This is Ryan Lovelace and his wife Katie from California. John Wegner and his quiver of wooden alea boards in California. Rennie Yater was in his 70s when he hauled out his carbon fiber boards to the beach. Skip Fry, another legendary surfer and surfboard shaper and activist from San Diego. This is the surfboard of the legendary Duke Hanamoku, and the first time I photographed a surfboard without a person. The board was carried to the beach for me by the curator of Shack, which is Surfing Heritage and Cultural Center. It's called the Flying V board, and it was made on the beach by Duke for the Vultee family, who were in the aeronautics field, thus the wings and the letter V for their name. Excuse me. And during the pandemic, I've published my first book on the surfboard. A few years before I'd begun photographing surfboards from Shack in San Clemente, where I was finally able to make surf pictures off the beach, this was a huge change for me. I thought, oh my God, this is going to be so great, so easy. But no, it was not true. It's really hard to photograph surfboards, especially in a studio setting. But it was really interesting to get to know surfboard history through surfboards. I came into contact with some very old boards that in themselves tell the story of surfing. I was particularly interested in longboards. In old boards, this one is from the early 1930s. As we know, the swastika is an ancient symbol used in South Asia as a symbol of good luck or spirituality. In this case, the manufacturer stopped making this line by the end of the 1930s as the war in Europe proceeded. This board was hand-painted by a Hawaiian mother for her daughter when she entered medical school. And this is a surfing club in California, Palos Verde. So for this project, I made glass negatives and I printed them on gelatin silver paper. This is one of the later boards I photographed, an original lightning bolt from Jerry Lopez. Sometimes we make things out of context. When I first started photographing surfers, I knew next to nothing about surf history or surf culture. I was just interested in the ocean. And I just put my tripod and 8x10 camera in the water to make this picture. And then years later, I was in a bookstore in Portland and I saw The History of Surfing by Matt Warshaw, and I stumbled onto this picture and it really floored me. It's taken in 1890. It's considered to be one of the first surf photographs. And I considered it affirmation from the gods that I was doing something intuitively that had already been done that I didn't know. Later, when I met Donald Takayama, the legendary Hawaiian shaper, he asked to have his picture taken in the same way. The story goes like this, if you don't know anything about Hawaii. Long before Kelly Slater was picking up world champion titles for his surfing prowess, the sport was being followed by Hawaiian natives in the 19th century. The missionaries who went to the island after Captain Cook's death in 1789 virtually stamped out all surfing in Hawaii because they thought it was ungodly. At the time, 1890, that first picture I showed you was taken, surfing had been almost wiped out on the island, and it wasn't until 1905 that its future was secured. That year, a youngster called Duka Hanamoku and his friends started their own surfing club, Huinalu, or Club of the Waves. Duke and his friends later became known as the famous Beach Boys of Waikiki, and they're credited with the rebirth of surfing in Hawaii. So in 2017, when I made my first trip to Hawaii, I photographed a Hawaiian native in a similar position. Traveling to Hawaii with wet plate, and this does not include the chemistry darkroom or other sundries, because one cannot fly with wet plate chemistry. So this is what it looks like when I travel. Many factors aligned in order for me to make my trip to Hawaii, and it opened up yet another new world for me. It's not just a place where I was able to photograph Kelly Slater, but I got a window into surf culture like I had never gotten before. I met Eddie Rothman and learned a thing or two about surf houses. I met Native Hawaiians who were proud to come in traditional cloth and boards to be photographed. And I found willing subjects in children, horses, ranchers.
Look that way.
Tell me, girls, how do you feel about making pictures with wet plate? You like it? Oh, thanks very much. We'll record it. This is their tintype. It was very breezy. I met Ha'a Kealanu, granddaughter of Buffalo Kealanu, considered surfing royalty. My work is collaborative. I never work alone. The dark box is This is Kenyatta, who assists me when I'm in Hawaii, also a wet plate photographer. And while I was there last, I got a gig shooting with Jack Johnson. It did not make the album cover, but still, it was a fun shoot, and he's a great guy. I was introduced to women lifeguards at Chinaman's Hat. And it's always surprising when I look at the color versions of my shoots. They were amazing women. Let's see if this is here. I guess not. Sorry, I thought this was, the film clip wasn't there. Okay. So traveling with wet plate is not new or original idea, and westward development in the US and the advent of photography ran a parallel route in the 1850s. Many of our photographic forefathers set forth to discover new topographies, new people, to document the landscape, and also the impact of war. The image on the left is of Nicholas Sparling. He's Roger Fenton's assistant in the Crimea, now a topic of conversation and war once again. And the image on the right is of my assistant Christine on the salt flats of Western Utah. I've read some accounts from Martha Sandweiss's book, Print the Legend, Photography and the American West. She mentioned that photography was thought of back then as having an inherent lack of narrative drama that limited its appeal. But the advent of wet plate negatives changed the way people thought of the photograph, as it was finally made the image reproducible, and that was a huge leap forward. So why is it I've taken a leap backward in time to make a photograph that's not a negative, but rather a one-of-a-kind direct positive, and only reproducible now through current technology? You could guess the answer. Because in art, there's no rules. You make up your own. But as I said, I was born in the Bronx, and both of my parents were first-generation Americans, also born in the Bronx. My notion of landscape as a young girl was the greenery of Van Cortlandt Park along the Major Deacon Highway, not the Western Salt Desert. So when in 2006, I was invited to live in a trailer on an abandoned Air Force base in Wendover, Utah, I jumped at it. I took my wet plate gear, and in between salt storms, I made a few pictures. There's a minimal element to the Western landscape, and I went with it. Lots of mud. Trains, the industry that divided Great Salt Lake. Pilot Peak and the Tales of the Donner Party occupied my assistant and I when we were there. I shot both film and wet collodion and fell in love with the West. And the West found its way into my tintype portraits as well. I was invited to a ranch in Santa Barbara where surfland and ranchland converged, and I began making multi-panel plates. These are three 11 by 14-inch plates from the film The Women and the Waves by Heather Hudson, where I made several group portraits for the film. I was interested in making larger pictures and also the idea of sequence. Trey Heighton, a surfer and literature PhD I met in Santa Cruz, described the oceanic horizon to me and how it has come to hold a new allure of adventure and endless possibility. Surfers, he said, might represent a new icon in Western mythology. The sea, he claims, is the last remaining untamed wilderness, and the image of the surfer has supplanted the place of the cowboy within the American imaginary. Because the traditional cowboy aesthetic has been displaced through enclosure and modernization, the icon of the surfer emerges as the new romantic figure of the American West. And this is an idea of which I've been thinking a great deal about. I read an article in Surfer magazine by Brad Malekian, where they interviewed a rabbi, a priest, and a Buddhist monk to discuss surfing and religion. The upshot from this religious community was that surfing, while not an actual religion, is a spiritual connector. It's like a conduit where one could appreciate God and the forces of the world. The wet plate process has a similar compatibility and consuming kind of commitment associated with. I often say that wet plate is not. I often say that wet plate is not a photographic process, but a lifestyle. Did somebody have a question? I discovered that both surfing and making wet plate pictures were immediate, in the now, and they required being in the moment. A dramatic example of this is described when riding in the tube of a large hollow wave. Braun Taylor writes in Surfing into Spirituality and a New Aquatic Nature Religion. Two things one hears most from those with such experiences is how they focus attention in such an intense way, and that one must truly live in the moment to flourish in large breaking waves. Living in the moment is believed to bring peace, purpose, wisdom. And this idea is often equated with a Zen state of mind. I'm not sure if photographing surfers has brought me peace or wisdom, but it has brought me purpose. So I have a few more recent pictures just to show you as a little aside at the end, a little way to go into something completely different. This is a body of work I just started, and I just thought it was a nice reflection on the surfboard. And that's it. The end.
Very good. Thank you, Joni.
You're welcome.
Okay, there goes Brandon. Brandon, you're first in.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just applauding.
Okay.
You're what?
Was giving an applause.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
okay.
That's really nice.
Okay, so if anybody's got a question,
Well, so I'm going to say something because I have to leave pretty soon. I really enjoyed your work. I thought it was interesting to see a whole series on made with not just the surfboards, but the wet plate that you do. And it seems I like it looks like maybe they were underexposed or not contrasty is what I was trying to think of. And I've seen a wet plate before, but it's much more contrast in them. How did you get it where it was less contrasty?
It really depends on the collodion itself, and also the way you process it. I tend to overdevelop, which kind of tones it down. And you get one thing with wet plate is collodion is you get beautiful shadow detail.
Mhm.
And if you process it correctly, you should get good contrast and shadow detail.
Very good. And you must have a formula for making this because your process looks pretty consistent.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of, masters in the field who have written manuals, and I'm actually in the process of writing a manual myself, a type of manual. So there's been a lot of, education in the field of wet plate, and so there's a bunch of different formulas that I've been following over the years.
Yeah. Okay, just two more things. I was interested, you said one of the silhouettes you made, you shot the top half of the person and then the bottom half. What was the
That's
reason for doing that?
So I had a chimera dark, one of those big chimera things with a strobe, and it
Uh-huh.
was only 6 feet high, and I couldn't get the whole person in front of
Okay.
it. So I fooled around and I tried to do it in sections. It seems like a crazy thing to do, but it worked out quite well, and
Yeah.
it kind of gave it another element, whereas you're piecing people together instead of just making a direct statement.
Right. Well, it's sort of like in the really slow film days in the early parts of photography, they would make two photographs, sky and ground, because they couldn't get one exposure. So it's basically the same
Oh,
idea.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just one other thing. Duke Kahanamoku, you probably know that, but he was more than a surfer. He was also a Olympic champion swimmer,
Yes.
I think, in the 100 and 200. Um, so,
Yeah, he
so
was way more than he was a Goodwill ambassador. He brought
yeah,
surfing to California. He did a whole lot more than what I said. Yes,
yeah. And his surfboard was teak also, as I remember. So very heavy and very tall. So,
very heavy and
yeah.
very tall.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. I'm gonna.
Thank you for coming to the
All right.
talk.
Thanks. I enjoyed it, like I said. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for coming by.
Okay. Thanks you, Michael.
Random Exposures wants to know if you ever tried surfing.
I have had a few lessons, yes. One in Australia and one in Hawaii. And I did get up. There is a photograph of me surfing in front of Diamond Head, but I'm not a surfer, but I did get a lesson. I highly recommend it. It's a great feeling.
Vanessa um, says, I can see the connective thread from your beach photos to surfers to ranchers and to the west. Can you tell us what you're working on now, other than the ironing boards, I guess?
So the ironing boards is something that I am still working on and hope to make a book of that. And I'm also, the pictures that you saw of the Western Salt Desert, I've returned there. I went there, in 2008, and here we are like almost 20 years later. So I've been trying to photograph this place over time and to see what kinds of changes there are. So those are the two things I'm currently working on.
Okay, accolades from Barbara. Thanks, Barbara. Anybody else have anything? Just jump on in if you do.
I just wanted to say that I lived in Hawaii for 16 years, and I never deliberately or methodically learned about surfing, but I had so many friends who were surfers, and they would get up at 5 in the morning, to go out. And your access, you got great access. And I don't know if that's something that you developed through your reputation or your persistence, because that's quite a coup to get involved with a Hawaii community, surfing community like that. Do you have
You're
any
absolutely
thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I started this project in 2006, so it's been going on for a long time. And one thing that this project did is that it grew exponentially because the internet grew, Instagram, all this stuff sort of, developed as the project developed. And it really helped to connect me. The other thing is I would meet people on the beach. I would tell them I was interested in going to Hawaii, and I would meet people interested in 19th century photography who maybe lived in Hawaii. And this one person connected me with Hawaii. Hawaii was the last place that I was able to go because I always waited to have some kind of connection because I can't just kind of show up cold. It doesn't really work that way. I need somebody to introduce me to who the right people are. And this is what happened in each place I went to. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was I just wondered if you also showed people your photographs and then they realized you were serious about it, that you knew something, that you cared about it. And it's almost a shame that you couldn't have met Rel's son. You probably heard about her. She was a legendary surfer who died of breast cancer.
I know. I really wish I had met her. I they do a thing in Montauk for her, or they used to do like a big event for her, and I used to make a donation and just, contribute to the spirit of what she was about. Um, but yeah, would have been wonderful.
Yeah. Now, many of the images you showed are serious portraiture with kind of a similar approach. Did you do any more candid shots? Do you have any more interactive images that you don't show or that maybe you show in different ways?
Not really. You can't really do a candid image with this because,
Oh, it's the process, right?
yeah. I mean, what I did do while I was photographing, and I didn't show this today because there's only so much time, but I did strap a GoPro camera to the tripod of my 8x10 camera, and I did roll film, like roll digital film, video, over a number of years, and I turned that into a film, but I don't really, and then I started wearing my Leica on top of it to try and take other pictures. It's just hard to do all of those things at once.
Oh, yes. Well, it seemed like you had a wonderful luster to the portraits that you did. Just I would love to have seen the original prints. That would,
Yeah, it's a big difference to look at the original tintypes versus, the digital reproductions. Um, but at least we can share it this way.
yeah. Well, congratulations. That is a lot of focus and determination.
Well, thank you.
And
It kept me busy.
Bill next.
Who's next? Bill?
Bill. There's a pecking order here.
It's Bill.
Yes.
Who's Bill?
Anybody else have anything for Joni?
I do. I'm Stanley Harwood, not Adrian.
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, Stanley
All right.
slash Adrian.
Yes. I don't even see my face on this screen anymore, but okay. So, Joni, you and I grew up near each other. I grew up at 225th and Broadway.
You grew up where?
In 225th and Broadway in the Bronx.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So apparently you can't take the grittiness out of the place of us.
You can't take the Bronx out of the girl.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So I've been doing a lot of work trying to shoot the sea pictures, but I've been doing it from the cruise ships we've been on vacations for the last 15 years. And I can definitely, after looking at yours, see the advantage of going back to the same location over and over and over again. And I could probably have more control over it. I'm just looking at it. I can get to Jones Beach quickly.
Uh-huh. Well, I think actually being on a cruise ship is kind of the same thing. Like you're going again and again and again. So there is that repetition of it.
The light's different in different places. The Caribbean light, European, the Mediterranean light. But it's definitely an advantage. I should try it. Like you gave me inspiration. I'm going to go to Jones Beach and try it for once a week and see if I can get over there and do that. Thank you for that. I love the sea pictures. They're just inspiring me. Yes.
Yeah, it was a good project to do. It really made me feel more whole. And like I said, I had a bad time with photography, and so I was glad to get back to it in a very kind of one-on-one way.
So you mentioned Sugimoto. He has an exhibit now in Southampton in the museum. What's the name of the place?
Parish.
At the Parish Museum. He's got 50
Oh, he
images.
does? I have to go see it.
Yeah, it's at the Parish Museum. It's running now at got 50 images, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, so if you're into going and making a trip over there.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I'm glad to know.
I can almost imagine you doing a series on the Paniolos on the Big Island, the Hawaiian cowboys,
Uh-huh.
just because of your interest in the icons of the new frontier, basically.
Yeah. I've never been to the Big Island. I've only been to Oahu. So, yeah. I feel like I've kind of aged out of my surfing days. Not that I'm completely done. I mean, I feel like I would like to go back to Hawaii one more time because I didn't really finish it as a body of work unto itself, but we'll see what happens.
And just lastly, as you get older, do you have any interest of returning more exclusively to your Leicas, or that's a lot of equipment to carry around?
It is. I mean, I really do. When I travel, the Leica is the only camera I take. I still shoot film. So, but I just really hate getting filmed through, airports, things like that. Yeah, I know. Photography's changed so much. Wonder how you all feel about that.
I have a question about shooting ultra large format tintypes. How do you keep the plate wet after the shoot to bring it back to? I guess you don't wash it on site and varnish it. How do you keep those big plates wet?
So, I used to we'd kept these shoe boxes, these stacking shoe boxes from the Container Store, and I would fill the shoebox with water. And so each tin type was covered in water, and I would take it back to my hotel or my house or wherever I was going, and then I would wash them later. And then I would dry them, and I would, like if I'm traveling, I don't varnish on location. I take everything back, just in a glassine envelope, and I scan it and varnish it in my studio.
Mm-hmm.
So, but now I use something called glycerin. It's much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a wet plate person?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, why?
I'm teasing you.
It was great. Yeah.
It's a great medium, but it's like a back-breaking medium.
Yeah. But when you shoot when you use glycerin, then you have to put it in some kind of container line. So how do you separate them and when you
I still use those shoe boxes. I don't know what size you shoot, but they're really wonderful. The Container Store, they're plastic shoe boxes. They take up a lot of space, but I never made like my friend, he's very handy. He made a box where like things slide in, but that never worked for me. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, it's tricky. Thank you.
sure.
Okay. If nobody else has anything, we'll go ahead and call it an evening. So last
right.
chance.
Ask away. What questions do you have? How many in the audience are wet plate people? Raise your hands. I only see your hand.
I think Vanessa is too. Oh,
Yeah. How long have you been making wet plates?
me?
Yeah.
For about 8 years.
Oh, so a long time. What format do you shoot?
Mostly 8x10.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done large format. I mean larger than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes a lot to do larger than that. 8x10 is a really great size, I think.
Yeah.
Big enough to be big and small enough not to be too cumbersome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I just want to say great work, Joni. It's a pleasure seeing your work.
Oh, thank you so much. Who's speaking?
It's Arthur down there.
Oh, hi, Arthur.
Okay, I guess we'll call it a night now. Thanks for coming this evening. It was a great talk. Hopefully you can come back next month on the 20th. We've got Eli Craven going to join us that night.
Oh, yeah. I would love to.
Okay, you're more than welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I hope you guys have read Sally Mann's new book, Artwork.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun read.